I said in my last Ted Lasso video that introducing something as intense to learn as Total Football halfway through a season, I said realistically it's insane, but artistically it's perfect. And as it turns out, that was pretty much the plot for episode 7, the madness of them trying to learn this philosophy in such a short time and getting nowhere, until they realise that as a squad of people they already suit the principles of Total Football perfectly. Through Ted's style of man management, they have spent the last 3 seasons developing into a very united squad that trust each other, are open with each other, and support each other to the maximum. Artistically then, Total Football becomes the perfect metaphor for all of the team's development across the entire series, and I love that. Especially so when Jamie gets to be the polar opposite to Zava. Zava was all about the ball being fed to him so he can do everything amazing himself, which, let's not forget, is season 1 Jamie. He originally hated passing for another to score and hated the idea of being a false 9, which was a role kind of similar to his new one. Nate's false 9 still left an impression on him in that sense. But he went from being like Zava to now being all about letting the team play through him, being the conduit or a roaming playmaker and providing them space and opportunity. And if that all isn't a metaphor for Jamie's quite subtle development across the show, then I don't know what is. Okay, not initially subtle development. Originally I think Jamie's arc was front and centre in season 1, but the further this show has gone on, the more he's dropped out of the limelight in a positive way. Perhaps you can even say that itself is a point about his development. The only trick I think they missed here was Roy not teaching him to be more of that playmaker. Roy's mentoring has shown us nothing but him making him run a lot, where I think it would have really added something to have seen Roy coaching him, teaching something, maybe about how to draw defenders away better and make space for others, or improving his passing, or even just short montages of Jamie being forced to read or watch and study lots of old matches from different classic managers. I think something or other that suggested he was learning more to understand the game would have made his suggestion about being the playmaker here more effective. That's my only criticism there though. It's still a wonderful metaphor, and where I don't normally like having characters spell out a metaphor for you, the way Trent does,
by slowly but surely building a club-wide culture of trust and support through thousands of imperceptible moments, all leading to their inevitable conclusion. Total Football.
I think it actually works quite nicely. Seeing Trent, who was previously sceptical about the plan, suddenly become enthralled in the excitement of it.
What a fucking dork.
Yeah. But he's our dork.
And look at me, also getting so carried away talking about this episode that I forgot to leave a space for my intro clip. No, it's too late for it now. You can have World Anvil instead. Then we'll get on to the rest of the analysis. Yes, World Anvil are still sponsoring me. This is a company I genuinely love. I'm going to keep promoting and supporting them as long as I physically can. And all of you are going to listen intently. World Anvil is an online tool for world building, character creation, story planning and writing, campaign building, and playing lots of different games. A load of useful stuff. I use it for my novel with the sprawling mess all of my world building turned into, and even just like, I was keen on my fictional town having a strong sense of community, so there was pages after page of who lives where, what do they think of their neighbours, where do they work, what are their opinions on local gossip. I don't know, a very big, sprawling mess that World Anvil can really help to organise with hyperlinks, different categories, timelines. You can even completely build out of your own designed calendars. Again, with hyperlinks attached to other articles, and a map to link the different timeline events too, if you fancy that. When there is so much detail, it is hard to remember it all, and having something like this to just quickly glance at and see what happens where and when becomes so damn handy. And there are other tools as well. I've not used all of them yet myself, but all the ones I have used are pretty straightforward. They do have lots of tutorials for how to use everything, but I've never needed to watch them. I've just figured it out myself pretty easily. There is a link in the description, and as a pinned comment there is the code TREE, which entitles you to 40% off any of their yearly subscriptions. And if you want to try it out first, they have a free version. Test that out for as long as you like first. Get familiar with World Anvil. You know, if you're interested, click the link. World Anvil. Now, what was I talking about before? So, any of you eagle-eyed viewers, please comment if you do have eagle eyes, because you may have noticed there's one important character that I have failed to talk about at all, I think, in any of my videos this season. And that is Keeley. I did say a bit about her in a long pinned comment, but otherwise I decided to wait with Keeley because I think her arc this season has been the slowest. For which a lot of people have been really critical, saying her story is going nowhere, she's been a waste of a character that just distracts from the football good stuff. I've strongly disagreed with that take. I think her storyline here somewhat reflects season 1 for Ted, going off to a strange place, pretty much on your own, and struggling to build a family of sorts, to win Barbara rounds the way Ted won round Roy or Jamie, and it's hard. The loneliness of it had her employing an old friend so that she felt less isolated, a decision that of course ended horribly. But now, finally, I think we are getting to the good stuff with Jack. You see, I reckon a lot of the criticism about Keeley's storyline does come down to Jack, and the writers being very tentative around her character, not wanting to reveal too much of her too early on. And as a result, I don't think Jack really got to show much of herself in the first few episodes. She was just someone rich who was there, and it meant in all of Keeley's story there wasn't really anyone apart from Keeley with much depth to explore. Maybe Barbara. I think they are doing quite a good job of slowly building her up. Something big is going to happen there. But even then, you know, Shandy was more of a comic relief character than someone to draw out depth. None of the employees particularly stand out, and then Jack was just Jack. Not much to bounce off character-wise as a result, until this episode, where you realise that Jack doesn't lack character. It's just very subtle to reveal itself, and for a good reason. Look, I've said all of that basically to say I can understand why people are so critical of her storyline this season. All the same, I don't think that makes any of the build-up this season for her story a waste. Here's my real point. Rory dumped Keeley. She'd gone off for this new job. We'd seen her struggling with loneliness that reconnecting to Shandy didn't help solve, and then in swoops the elegant, rich, charming Jack. Suddenly we're in a situation where the usually very confident and self-assured Keeley is susceptible to fall into the arms of a person that is starting to parallel Rupert. I say that tentatively, and I don't want any of it to sound critical, because she might not be Rupert at all. This might all be fine, you know. The love bombing in this episode was very extreme, and is the sort of thing Rupert would have done, and Rebecca makes the comparison for us, but we shouldn't judge too early, I don't think. Keeley has a good go at trying to rein in Jack at the end of this episode, and we'll have to see whether that proves successful in the long term for their relationship or not. We also know this show is wonderfully stubborn in its refusal to condemn characters. For example, I adored how Nate's dad, a character we know has been very damaging to Nathan, is also shown to be a man who can, in his own way, be quite warm and playful with his granddaughter. Does that erase the negative effect he's had? No. People can be both, or they can hurt you without being a downright villain. Sometimes unhealthy dynamics develop for any number of reasons. Sometimes they don't realise, or sometimes a person can genuinely love you and also be harmful at the same time, which is just the most confusing thing of all if it leaves you in a position where you both hate and love someone at the same time. A feeling actually I reckon most of the audience has had towards Nate. That's fitting, isn't it? Anyway, the point is, it might mean Jack isn't the extreme of Rupert. I've yet to notice imagery that links her to Darth Sidious in the same way, for example. And that could be important, you know, because once upon a time Rebecca fell head over heels for this villainous Sith Emperor. And I can understand why she did, but I'm not sure everybody would watching this show. They might imagine they'd never fall for someone like that. They might not understand how the hell it would happen to Rebecca. In that sense, I think Jack could be a great way to show us how nice and rosy and exciting it can be in the beginning. Who the hell does not want to be spoiled, you know? I've never had anyone shower me with gifts like that. The idea you would matter enough to someone else for them to want to shower you with gifts. Yes, it should be a red flag, particularly when Jack is paying for Keeley's meal out with Rebecca. Like Jack making her presence known between Keeley and Rebecca even when she isn't there. Finding a way to wedge herself between them, but also doing it in a way that they can't be mad about because it seems like a nice gesture. They should be red flags, however Keeley has already fallen into a relationship with Jack at this point. We, like Keeley, don't notice any of this stuff appearing until now when she is already in a relationship, and that makes it more difficult to step back, but also, having already become attracted to Jack, she's more inclined to take a positive view of it. And let's also be fair, I think Keeley communicates her feelings beautifully in the croissant scene.
Just want to hang out one time where it doesn't feel like you're sweeping me off my feet.
You're incredible.
But you've got to let me do something for you every once in a while.
She does all of that wonderfully. She then eats the croissant because it appears to just be a croissant. However, there's a ring inside, and Jack laughs expressively. And you do wonder if this could be a way forwards for all of this gift giving. You know, for Jack to start framing it as a bit of a joke, mischievously giving gifts like a jokey way to wind up Keeley now. I wonder if that could happen, and then because it's just a joke, Keeley feels guilty if she gets mad or if she tries to set a boundary, until with enough time, she finds herself just giving in to something that deep down wasn't just a joke. Maybe it's again too early to be judging Jack like this. This is massive sweeping speculation I've made there. I just think it would be a meaningful direction for the plot to go in. For Keeley to be heading in a similar direction to what Rebecca once was, and for Rebecca to play the very difficult role as a good friend to help her navigate through it. I think we're definitely meant to think skeptically about all of the gifts when it is also paralleled by Nate making a fancy gift for Jade. In a way, you know, we do see the other side of gift giving there. To be honest, I think I'd find it scary as hell if I was presented with a map like this by someone, but all the same, how gift giving can be something sweet and thoughtful, except it gets run over. Nate doesn't need it. A point hugely important for his arc, actually, because he is enough. Who he is, really. Including all this clumsy awkwardness. He is enough. This episode we see him not spit into the mirror, and my god, I have never celebrated so much at a fictional show. Yes, you know, he is really finding that belief now, just like I talked about before. Last time I was also hesitant to talk too much about Jade and her sudden switch from seemingly cold to then eating baklava with him. I think she was originally quite cold and a bit rude in places, and I fully understand why you might be to someone who, let's face it, could have come across a bit creepy to Jade. But if that is how she felt, rightly or wrongly, it did then seem a sudden switch to suddenly be eating baklava at the first sign of Nate showing some humanity to her. But then I stop and I wonder if the way we see Jade has been entirely framed by Nate's perspective. Perhaps they play up her slightly to suit how Nate feels about their interactions. Of course she'd feel super rude and cold and rejecting towards him. Of course her suddenly eating baklava with him feels like a miracle that's come out of nowhere and makes no sense. This is Nate still struggling, though definitely improving, with his sense of self-worth. Self-worth being a very good word, as we make one last quick point about Roy, okay? Another reason I reckon people find Keeley's storyline this season a bit pointless is because there's this mystery still hanging in the air. Roy and Keeley went from what seems like a really solid relationship to suddenly he dumped her at the end of last season, and we still don't know why. Or do we? Earlier this season, Roy had a great monologue about why he left Chelsea, how as he got older he suddenly wasn't quite as sharp as the rest of the team anymore.
I thought, I can't keep up anymore. I'm not good enough.
So he left.
I don't want to be one of them broken down footballers just taking up space until they're dropped years after they should have been.
It felt meaningful, but I couldn't quite make sense of why until someone somewhere pointed it out in the comments. Whoever you were, thank you. The point is he's talking about Keeley there. You remember in season 2 when he did the photo shoot with Keeley and then he was cut out of all of the photos used for the magazine? You remember how everyone assumes she dumped him because apparently she's out of his league, and now she's off to some super high class office where Roy would probably feel completely out of place. Ted says,
a lot of folks think it's better to quit than be fired. Yeah.
A lot of folks think it's better to dump than be dumped. Roy feared he wasn't good enough for Keeley, either that she'd someday leave him or that he was holding her back, becoming a burden stopping her from excelling in the way she deserves to. Funny in that idea of self-worth there, how his story relates to Nate. When the team go back to Chelsea, it felt sad for Roy because it hits him with regret.
Yeah, maybe I should have stayed. Just fucking enjoyed myself.
So that situation set against Jack, and also possibly Barbara having some effect, all of it is building to a really interesting climax that I am fully on board for. Are you? Like the video, comment what I missed or got wrong, subscribe, support me on Patreon, live your life, eat maple syrup pancakes, maybe check out World Anvil, do whatever it is you're doing today, but otherwise, hopefully see you next time. And And as ever, a special thank you goes to Luke Hoare, Treat Chukaba, Michael Gallagher, InSquares, Flying Spider, Arwin, Devin, Soup in Boots, Samara Salsi, Joshua C. Follier and Chad Bramwell. Thank you.